All right. Hey, everyone. So today we're just going to go over a few things. Honestly, there's not much to cover from today's actual stuff. Since we're nearing the end of the semester, we're getting closer to like just kind of reviewing more than we are learning new things, which is good. Today we have a few new things, and we have some other stuff that we were going to cover that we skipped on Monday and from the week that we did the storyboard exercise. But just a heads up, next Monday, the 19th, we're going to be going over the shot list exercise and the green screen exercise, watching everybody's stuff. And then we're just going to be talking about a few things and just like reviewing the films we watched and discussing a few more films if we have enough time.
If I look big in the green screen, guys, remember the camera adds 10 pounds and COVID. So just remember that. I said if I look bigger in the green screen, it's because the camera adds 10 pounds and, COVID. So.
Yeah, I be hating that shit, man.
It's just remember.
I be looking fat. On some cameras.
No,
and then when they see me in person, they be like, "Oh, you're not that big." And I'm like, "Damn, thank you."
Nothing like, I don't know. I'm okay with being healthy. That's what matters. But lately I've just been kind of a lot of water weight for some reason.
Yeah, you're fat. Yeah, it's okay. You can say it.
I've been getting a lot of messages from my mother. Let's just keep it at that.
But yeah, so Monday, all we got is going over the green screen, going over the shot list exercise, and just talking about going a little more in depth into the cinematography about the films we watched and things like that. Like going over some of the things we think were some of the green screen setups and other stuff that we've learned since then. Not too much, but remember, shot list exercise, green screen exercise. Those are both going to be Monday. If they're not done by then, you can get them done, but we won't be reviewing them in the group. All right. What's that noise? All right. So first, we're going to start off talking about filming visual effects. Visual effects is a lot about, just like anything else in film, it's a lot about just getting it, knowing what you want the end product to be. So you have that plan in place of how you're going to get it done. When you have a very heavy visual effects, like in something like Avengers, you probably talk about it for months, how you're going to get each shot and how you're going to get each scene. And for stuff like Avengers and the bigger budgeted projects, they have things like they do storyboards and visual storyboards, animatics, stuff like that, to kind of show what it's going to look like in the end without having to do all the heavy visual effects work. They just do like basic stuff to kind of show how it is. And then they go in and they kind of match the shots and see if they want to change anything. But as you can see, stuff like that, like when you see stuff on screen, it's really just a lot of green screen, which is why we need to learn about green screen, and a lot of interesting poses that the actors have to do and act like so that they look like they're doing the stuff on the film that we see at final product. You want to make sure you keep track of all the camera settings you have when you're filming for visual effects, because that information is going to be vital, because you're going to try to match the After Effects stuff.
I'm going to send some videos for you guys, for those of you that didn't have time to watch. Oh, sorry, honey. It's because I was muted for a second. To watch the syllabus will blow your freaking minds. It's so cool, like the differences and what a good green screen artist can do, and just the work with miniatures and all that kind of stuff. I saved some videos onto my favorites, and I'll be sending them to the group. They're from the syllabus, but I just highlighted a couple, and I'll send them out.
Yeah, you can send them to me too, please. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy seeing how it is from before and after. If you watch behind the scenes of anything that has visual effects, or even movies you don't even think have visual effects, there are a lot of like big city landscapes and stuff are sometimes built in CGI, or it's just added to the background. So it's like some of the foreground elements are real, but to make the city even more wide and expansive, they add like extra stuff to the background and make it look like a bigger city than it is. or a different location. If they don't want it to look like they're in maybe like Chicago and they want it to look like New York, they might have a few buildings and then add in like the New York backdrop to make it look more like New York. So if you watch those videos, you'll see they add a bunch of different elements, and you can see like from the start to the end, there's like 10, 12, 15 layers of different items and objects and atmosphere stuff to make it look like the end product. So there's a lot going on in any kind of visual effects work. But so you want to make sure to keep track of all your camera settings, because you want the visual effects, like if you're having somebody shoot a fireball out of their hand, you want that fireball to be the same frame rate and the same exposure level and all these other things as the prime footage, so that it matches and blends well together. If you don't do that, it's going to look weird. It's going to be at a different frame rate, which is going to make it look, it's going to move differently than it would if it was more natural, and it's not going to look right. So you always want to keep track of like any kind of camera settings. Hopefully you have somebody that can help you out if you're trying to do visual effects, but if it's your first time, just make sure you know what you're filming with and what you're going to film at, so that when you get into the editing room, you can try to practice and play around with it to get it to look more natural than you would if you just did it without any pre-planning at all. They say
Oh yeah, oh sorry, honey. I was just gonna say that the what's it called? Rock Film Riot actually had a really good video about that, about prepping and all the stuff that went into it and stuff like that.
Yeah, they did. All the things you need to look out for when you're filming visual effects. They say if you're doing tracking, which is like this tiger in this scene, that boat's going to be moving on the real water with the blue screen in the background and all of that, and then they're going to take out the blue screen and add in the sky, and they're going to digitally include that tiger to make it look like it's on the boat. But since the boat's going to be moving around, they're going to be doing something called tracking, which is taking a digital element and kind of putting it somewhere in the scene where it's going to stay. Whenever the boat bobs up and down, that digital thing is going to bob up and down too, so it looks like it's actually in the boat instead of just floating. So you want to use a higher shutter speed if you're going to be tracking something. That way there's nothing blurry, because tracking is really hard when you don't have something you can track. Like if you look at the left, you can see in the blue screen they have these little, like, I think those are like pink crosses, and that way they track where that sky is. So if the camera moves closer to the guy, or if it goes around him in a circle, they can track those little pink crosses and see where in the green screen or blue screen space he is. That way the background in the digital footage matches and it moves with him and the camera moving. That way it looks, instead of that same background being there the whole time, the clouds.
Like it's moving. Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different tricks they got to do to make sure that it looks that way, because otherwise you have to just kind of eyeball it, and it's really difficult. So you always want to make sure you have something that you can try to follow along with if you're doing any kind of visual effects or like a green screen stuff like that. If you're moving the camera, it gets more difficult, because you got to make sure that background is going to be changing with the foreground instead of just, that same skyline looking like that, because then you're going to easily tell that it's not real. So the higher shutter speed will keep it from getting blurry if there's any quick movements with the camera, and that way you can keep that tiger right there on the boat, and you can make sure that it stays where it's supposed to be in the boat without it getting blurry and it getting hard to tell where's that tiger supposed to be. So
I sent the top 3 videos to the WhatsApp and to you particularly, Brett.
Thank you.
So you guys can check it out later, especially the last one. It's like
another thing.
I was just going to say, Brian mentioned, remember, never rely on green screen completely if you can, and especially if you don't have a good editor for it and all that kind of stuff. But it's just to show you what good editing can do and what good VFX work can do in the last one. Go ahead, honey. Sorry. Just trying to state that. I
can actually add to that. Another note I had is they say to really think about practical lighting while you're doing visual effects. whatever the visual effect is, you want to have like a real light there or something they can interact with so that it feels more real. Any light that you have coming through, like if somebody's shooting a fireball out of their hand, I've seen people talk about how they use a flashlight and they just kind of like turn the flashlight on, shining it at their hand, or a film light. That way their hand lights up as they're supposed to be shooting the fireball. And that way you have something to work off of, so it's not all digital, because digital is not going to look as good as practical. So anything you can do practically to help.
I just had a. Mhm.
Go ahead.
I just had an idea. Sorry to interject. Like what you just said, I was even thinking about you know how you could take a spray can and put a match in front and it'll put like flame. You
Yeah.
can even do something like that and try to like crop the person out who's doing it. Cause like in I Am Legend, yo, they were doing a lot of green screen, but they had guys on top of him like straddling him, acting like the dog, and it was in a full costume. Like, and it's just certain things you could. It's so much things I feel like you could do.
With
You just gotta
practical
have that creative
lighting,
mind.
with
Yeah,
practical
there's
lighting,
definitely a lot
especially
you
like
can do to get it to work. That's
those.
why you have to have that those meetings beforehand to talk about it, to say, hey, visual effects supervisor, and hey, cinematographer, what do you guys think? How are we going to get this done? Because there's so many different
Right.
ways to do it.
So basically what he's saying is, even if you're going to use a special effect, you have to think about how is it, for example, I think Film Riot, their video gave a really good example with lighting. He was holding a lightsaber. If you just add that lightsaber in the effects and don't add like a light shining on him as well, the same color as a lightsaber on his face, to show it next to him,
Right.
it won't look real. It'll look added in,
Right.
it'll look fake. If you don't add wind and fog to your snow scene,
Like
for
that.
example, like the guy was showing,
Right.
it won't look real. So don't just rely on the green screen. Also think about, okay, if I'm gonna have this image added later, I need the surrounding to look like it's actually there. I need the wind
Yeah.
or the lighting or the
Right.
the way the person's hair is moving, or the way if they're cold, if they're hot, to match what is around them, their surroundings, or what they're holding.
Yeah. So
That's
what they
very
did
important.
is when they were practicing a lightsaber effect like this, the person would be holding something, and they actually used a light, like those big long lights you'll see and on the ceiling in like a hospital or something. They took one of those, put some color around it, and it was either red or green or blue depending on what color the lightsaber was. And the person was actually holding a light. So anywhere they moved it, that light was reflecting off of them. So it looked more like that after picture without them having to do that in post. They just had that light shining off of them. And stuff like that really helps to blend the effect into the footage to make it seem more real, because a lot of it is.
Right.
You always want to be aware of, like, if you don't have a light like that you can use, but you're doing something like a lightsaber, just be aware of where you can put light to make it look like it's coming from the lightsaber itself. If you know where they're you could have a light shining underneath her right now, and it's, even though it's a Lego, you could still like shine it underneath it, and the light's shining mostly on her chin and her forehead because it's coming from underneath where the lightsaber is.
So it needs to be a balance of both. You can have the special effects, but also never forget to also have your surroundings match those special effects that you want and help sell that image.
Right. That's really good information. I didn't think about that.
And the Film Riot video especially gives some really cool examples you might want to check out.
Yeah, because since we're all going to be more of a lower budget thing, they show some like really good lower budget options to make it seem more real. Like they put somebody in a snowstorm, or they put somebody on a skyscraper where it's really windy, so they had a leaf blower just blowing in the person's hair. Actually, they showed an example of the person was doing super speed, and so every time she would appear somewhere, they would like blow a leaf blower at her hair, so it looks like she's just
arrived.
Yeah. And so then the wind from her running is blowing her hair back, and so then it just sells the effect more. So you always want to try to figure out
creative ways
things you can do and practical things you can do to help integrate those effects.
Damn,
A
that's
lot
awesome,
about
man.
it's a lot about lighting and figuring out how and where you're going to light them and when, because certain effects are going to cause different lighting. You want the lights to flicker, you want them to get bigger and then shorter. Like, what kind of effect are you going for at the end? How big is the effect going to be? If they're shooting a fireball, how big is it? How is it going to grow? Is it going to start out small and then get bigger, or is it just going to be big the whole time? You know, you want to figure all that stuff out so that whenever you're on set, you can do the lighting that way too, so you really help integrate it into your whole scene.
Right.
Also, if you're going to put a character in there, they usually have, I don't know if you guys have seen it, let me see if I can find one, someone like Gollum, or you know, the little guy from Harry Potter,
Uh-huh.
little Gollum, I don't know what he was.
Dobby.
What?
Dobby.
Dobby, yeah. So they were actually people in mocap suits walking around, crawling around, being that character. Even stuff for like Smog in The Hobbit, even though he's a giant creature, there was still the guy in the
On
mocap suit
stilts,
walking
right?
around, being there so that the actor had something to interact with. So you always want to try to give people something to interact with too, because acting with nothing and having to pretend everything is really hard. So if you can give them somebody to look at or somewhere to look,
Right.
even though they're going to be
Yeah.
interacting with something that's not going to look like this person, it's going to maybe look like a transformer, let's say. You'd still want to have them looking somewhere and looking at a person and interacting, because it's going to be easier for them to get that performance.
Because green screen is
Right.
already something where it takes a lot of imagination for the actor. He doesn't have much to work with. It's all in his emotions, all in his head pretty much. So you having that thing that you can give them, that they can interact with, that they can play off of, at least, it really helps.
Right.
Amelia Clark was talking about when she was doing the dragon scene in season 7, riding the dragon. She had this huge green mechanical thing, and she was like, "Well, I've never ridden a dragon, so it was kind of hard for me to tap into that emotion, because I didn't really have anything to work with other than this huge square that I had to ride up and down."
This thing. And they turned that thing into the dragon. So she's just riding this big, huge green thing, and there's a green screen behind her, and she has to pretend like she's in the sky and she's riding a dragon.
And
So
she's on this huge ice lake.
It's still good that she had something to hold on to, and it seems
Yes.
kind of like a dragon. They even shaped it. If you can look, there's like scales and stuff, which is good because that gives her something to grab onto and feel. Certain
Wow, yeah.
It gives the actors too some reference of where to hold and stuff like that, where to grab.
Certain movies, I think I heard, was it Interstellar? Which one was the one that we were seeing that was in space, honey?
Yeah.
They didn't
I
give
think
him any,
Yeah,
gosh, it
Interstellar.
they
wasn't
didn't even give him
Interstellar.
anything
It
to touch.
was
All the props were just fake, so she was just moving her hand in the air, and then the people went in and added some effects in to make it look like she was grabbing onto something, and that makes it harder
I don't remember which one it
both
was, but it wasn't
visual
Interstellar.
effects team and for the actor, because they're not really doing anything, but they have to pretend like they are, and then somebody
that's
has to go
tough.
in and match it to their movement. So it's just a lot more work. So it's always better to give them something than to give
Yeah,
them.
that's very difficult. And then trying to stay in character, that's very hard.
Oh yeah, especially if you're used to theater, if you're used to, I believe it was Sir Ian McKellen when he went to do Lord of the Rings. It was hard for him because he had to interact with nothing and look at something. And he was a Shakespeare trained actor, so it was a new realm of him to work with green screen and stuff like that. It was quite difficult for him. It was a learning curve for sure.
Can't find an example for this, but another thing I had is it's once you're doing any kind of visual effects work, it's a lot about lighting it the same way that you have in the scene. They were talking about how, most cameras, especially lower grade, are going to have some kind of film grain. They're going to have some kind of noise. It's not going to be crystal clear, but if you're making something digitally, it's going to be crystal clear because it's coming straight from the computer. And so sometimes you want to go in and actually add in some film grain and add in some noise to make it look and match the footage you already have. Because otherwise it's going to be going to be very easy to tell that that thing does not belong there. You want to match it to the colors. You want to match it to the way everything looks. If it's kind of grainy and ugly, you still want to match your CGI or whatever you have to that. Even if it's going to make the effect look a little uglier, you still want it to look more real than you do want to make it look like it stands out to the point where it doesn't look real at all. So one of the
the main thing is, like, even Star Wars, like, it doesn't look, you can tell that there's something there. It doesn't have, the point of CGI is it doesn't have to look 100% real, like, oh my gosh, that's, you know, sometimes you can just tell, but it's about blending into the scene, blending into the image. Like, something can look not necessarily 100% real, or you can tell, but it blends well enough to where it's not like this sore thumb sticking out, you know?
Yeah, so certain scenes, like the footage you'll have will be darker or brighter, and then you'll just want to go into your effects, and whatever you added in, you just want to make it darker or brighter to make it look like it's coming from that place. The next thing,
the mixture of practical effects and special effects is always important.
The next thing you want to do if you're doing your own visual effects stuff is you want to think about where the lighting is in the scene. If I shot something outside in a wooded area and I know the sun's coming from the left, I want to make a digital light for that, whatever I'm putting in there, the CGI element. Maybe I'm adding a creature, let's say. Then I want to put a light and kind of match it to where the sun is so that it looks like there's light going onto that creature instead of it just being no light at all.
Character.
And that as well. So you always want to match the light of the scene, and you also want to match the colors and the look. It's very, that's how you start to see, like, whenever you see really bad CGI and you see really good CGI, the difference a lot of the time is just the time they put into the lighting and just matching it to the footage. All right.
You see that in a lot of the B movies or the C movies.
Yes, and it sticks out so bad.
Yeah, man. It'd be like, it's so bad.
Yes.
They'd be having a good storyline, but it's just, come on. Cinematography be horrible.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's exactly why we say, because there are some people that are like, well,
that's another thing. I want to touch on that. Like, just if you have an idea for anything and you know that your budget's not going to allow it, I would say kick out that scene rather than keep it in and do it crap.
Right.
Because
right.
It's going to make the whole thing seem a lot worse and lower quality than it is, because that visual effects scene didn't work. You don't have the budget for it, or you don't know how to do it. It's good to practice, but if you're actually trying to make a project, I would advise against doing something that you're not going to be able to do yet.
If you're not there yet, it can make your project look crappier than it actually is, and it can, you know, kind of make it look like you put less effort in than you actually did. But when we talk about special effects, like from an independent standpoint, or even from an older movie standpoint, reiterating, it's not necessarily, oh my gosh, well, it's never going to be 100% perfect. Nothing's, unless you're like a millionaire, like you have millions of dollars of budget, it's never going to be 100% perfect. But it's knowing how to blend in the practical effects and the special effects, knowing how to have your lighting match the image you want to appear on screen. Having that makes a huge difference in blending your image in, to where the point that we've seen like shorts and stuff like that are sci-fi or whatever, and you can tell that the special effects are not the best, but you can tell that they blended it in pretty well and they did a good job on it, you know? I just want to make that clear, because I know that it's very hard, especially when you're in the independent film community, to judge someone's work and like see, okay, well, judge it in a way that is fair and you're not overly expecting something, but you can also judge fairly in the sense of, well, you could have also done this better. And that's not being unfair to your budget. It's just, well, you didn't blend it in as much, you know, fair criticism, but also appreciated. I don't know if I got that point across or not. I'm still working on the eloquency thing, but.
No, it was good. Get it.
All right, so next, when we start learning about editing, you guys will see more of this, but you just want to make sure you're organizing and naming all of the different layers. There's a bunch of layers that go into any kind of visual effects work, or even just regular timeline in general. You have like audio and video and different video layers. So you always want to make sure you're organizing them and naming them right, so that if you do have a group that's going to help you, or once you do start doing like a collaborative effort and your guys are doing different editing, you want to make sure everybody's on the same page of what everything is, what every effect does.
Right.
So it's always good to name them, like, what does this do? Does this, brighten something, or whatever. Like, you want to name it to make sure you know what it is for yourself.
Right.
Easily find it
Right.
if you want to kick it out. And so if you do send it off to anyone else, they know what everything is, and it's a lot easier for them to see what everything does instead of having to click it on and off to see what happens when it goes away and when it comes back on and all of that. So always be organizing is very important, especially when it comes to editing. And just keeping backups and stuff like that is always really important. All right. So that's all of that for just like general visual effects. And we'll get into more of this type of stuff when we start learning about editing, but we just kind of wanted a general overview. Lastly, I wanted to look into miniatures, because they're actually used quite a lot. You wouldn't think they were used as much as they are, but miniature sets are used for like these big, huge landscapes. The closer you get to them, the more obvious it is that they're miniatures. So usually they stay kind of like a little bit out of
Forward.
but they do use these a lot, and they're really cool, and they're actually like they're not terribly hard to do. Some of the videos we show, one of them
Depends on what you're doing, obviously.
well, yeah, like if you're doing a set like this, it's going to be a lot longer than
Yeah.
doing a single room, but
it's also a lot of detail, and if you have to get closer, they also use like fog or lighting tricks or stuff like that.
Yes, there are artists who actually like make these worlds and do it professionally and everything.
James actually recommended one of them. I think it was the first semester
He
for
did?
us.
Oh,
Yeah, I forgot the name of the guy, but he was talking about him, and I think I follow him on Instagram. He makes some like really amazing stuff.
Oh, I hope he's not outside of our budget.
Oh, he lives in Sweden, I think. So yeah, he's probably
outside the budget. No, but like sometimes you can use just like general stuff you can find at a store. You can go to any kind of arts and crafts store, has like these little miniature trees and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like Hess, or even them old trains,
Yeah,
do a train scene.
like this. If you wanted to do a scene kind of like this, you could find a bunch of these types of things. It'd be like little toys or collectibles or something. You could find.
Actually, Star Wars, if I'm not mistaken, I think I'm not. They used a lot of miniatures in the first ones, didn't they?
Yep.
From the behind the scenes,
they created the ships, and they made like foot-long ones and stuff to make all the things, the little AT-ATs and all that. These are all like little miniatures. So if you can see,
yeah, a lot of scenes in Star Wars were miniatures on a blue screen.
And so it's a good way to like show a big open scene without having to go on location. If you don't have the budget for location, maybe a budget for a miniature set would be better. It still will cost money, of course, and it won't look as real. But if you I would say start practicing with this kind of stuff. I think it would be kind of cool to try out.
I think so too. I think sometimes when they open with that CGI look, sometimes it looks way too fake. You know?
Yeah, so maybe like something a little more real, like a miniature set would look better as long as it's made correctly. Like you can see he's pouring like powdered sugar or whatever he's pouring on it to make it look like the snow, and it's making it look great. And then you just have like a blue screen in the background to add in whatever you want in the back. Usually, this one looks like a pretty big miniature set, but usually it'll be something more like this. And you can see this on a green screen, and it's just like a little.
So they'll shrink the character, they'll shrink the actor or something like that?
They'll have the actor usually on a green screen, and then they will, shrink the image of that down. And once they get into the close-ups and stuff like that, they'll be at a different location. They'll be on an actual set somewhere.
And then they'll add or layer
whether it's just like in front of a wall or whatever, they'll do something like that. But you can see, you just add in the background up top left. to something like that, and it makes it look a lot more real. So building miniatures is pretty cool. It's pretty. It's good to get like complex,
That's a hell of a hobby.
great worlds and environments without the need for a budget or CGI.
I have to find
Oh
somebody
yeah,
who loves
people have
building.
full-on hobbies of building this stuff and painting it and shooting it and like.
Yeah, because the other thing
really
you got to do is if you look at this little set right here, the light's coming from the left. So you got to make sure in your scene, you got a sun or something coming from that area so that it's lighting up the right part. You always want to make lighting is huge when it comes to visual effects and anything else. To make it look real and feel real, it has to match the actors. And so when you're doing miniatures, you got to make sure you're matching where the actors would be, where the sun would be coming from, or whatever lighting source. And I think usually you can't get too close. Some things if you have a miniature builder, they'll do extra work to make it look more real, but usually these aren't used for close-ups or anything like that. They're just used for like a really wide establishing shot to get like an idea of what it is. But things like in Lord of the Rings, they use a lot of miniatures for the locations. So when you first visit a location, it's really just a miniature, but it looks like it's from in the sky and the camera's coming down from a helicopter or something like that. But in real life,
Yeah, those are good things we could do too. Yeah.
Yeah, the miniature work in Lord of the Rings was insane.
yeah, they
So
said
good.
that this was one of the ones where the people worked really hard on it, so where they could get really close. Not incredibly close, but they could get a lot closer than most miniatures allow, because there was just so much detail.
Right.
So yeah, it's just something to think about if you guys are trying to do anything. I've seen videos where they add like little trees and they add like a car or something, and then they have the actor stand far away in front of a green screen. That way they can look like they are in the scene. That's forced perspective. Doesn't work as much if you want to move the camera, but it works perfectly for static shots. So if you just like set something up and you had somebody go way back here in the back, you could make it look like they're standing inside the place, pretty much. Does anybody have any questions or comments about visual effects? Oh, this is something cool.
Wait,
if you want to watch
sorry,
this,
I didn't realize muted, so I was
so like
talking.
right here, you got the green screen of the cars. They're adding that layer and another layer of like a mountain, and they're adding that back in, taking out the windows, making it darker,
Honey,
adding some lights. And now it looks like there's cars in a snowstorm.
honey,
Yes.
Sarah had a question.
So I was just gonna say, so if you did like a miniature setup and you built it all, so you would film that miniature setup, and then you would use it like a green screen effect, and then you could film yourself and then put yourself like inside it and things like that. And then if you wanted to like have it move, like parts move, you could have like the camera filmed it while you kind of move parts around. Is that possible?
It is possible, but usually these are just used for like establishing shots or like changing a scene. They're not used as much for actually having people in this.
Because the amount of editing and layering that you would have to do is a lot, and a lot can go wrong in that process.
Well, it's just that when you start moving the camera and you start moving the people more, it starts to get a little harder to keep it looking real. Usually these are that's why they're usually just used for like either push-ins or pull-outs, like just like to establish the shot and make it look like, oh.
Or sometimes they will have, for example, like in Lord of the Rings, they will have the miniature to do like those wide, like those around shots, and then they will have a smaller version of that where the actors are and where they will be contained.
I mean a larger version.
Yeah, right. A larger version, but smaller in the sense like it's a piece of what that huge thing is. It's like a certain
they might have
place.
like the whole building and they go around showing the whole building. And then when you get to the actual actors, they're just in front of like a small wall or like a corner, and that's the whole set.
Or they will actually build practical stuff. Like in Game of Thrones, they built a lot of practical sets, like a lot of big buildings and practical sets and stuff.
Yeah,
like
but
that.
they didn't use as many miniatures in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I'm just saying like examples of ways you do it. V said,
we're just talking about miniatures. Like this, miniatures are used so that you don't have to build the sets as much. You just build a piece of the set, and it makes it feel like you're inside that location, even though really it's just a wall or a corner, because you have established that they're in this snowstorm. So now when you go to these actors, maybe you just have a side of a car and that's it. That's your whole set. But we feel like they're right there because we've seen that. If you're doing this, where it's the example that's showing right now.
He has a question. She said, but can actors be edited into the set considering all the edits? Do we have to hire a set designer or artist to create original pieces, buildings, and props?
So you don't have to. Usually people will, just because your set's probably not going to look like something that's ordinary. Now there are ways you can, like there are scenes I've seen where people just buy stuff from the store, and like this little car right here that's all rusty. There's probably just like a toy of some sort that they painted to make it look rusty and kind of chipped up a little bit with a knife. So there are ways you can do it. It's just, and you don't have to build it from scratch. But if you're making a thing kind of like Lord of the Rings, you would have to build it from scratch because it's going to be a completely new place. But if it's just like a train station or something, and this
Right, or like a deserted island or a deserted junkyard or something like that, you could get away
yeah,
with
if it's
that.
something you can find in the real world, it's most likely going to have a model of some sort somewhere in one of those craft
Like
stores.
that.
But if it's something new, then yeah, if it's a new location, then you have to figure out, are you going to buy some stuff and then kind of change it to make it look different, or are you just going to build it from scratch?
Yeah, if it takes place in a futuristic world, for example, you can maybe get a regular building and then paint it a certain way, or maybe if you want the buildings to look a little different, it might be different, but just
Yeah,
regular
see, the
skyscrapers.
miniatures are usually free to use because they aren't, they're based off of real things. So if you're filming it, they're not going to be able to tell if you're using the real thing or not, as long as you're not showing any logos, probably on the like the bottom of the car or whatever you get. They probably have a logo somewhere. So as long as you're not showing the logo or the name, it's free to use because they're not going to be able to tell where you got it from.
Don't have a Hot Wheels logo really clear on your car's shop.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried with like props and stuff, just in my opinion, just as long as there's no logos, because you can't really tell, and certain objects can be made by many different places. So I would say that it would only be a problem if it was like a distinct item from, you know what I mean? Like, I guess.
Yeah, like if you're taking a Star Wars ship, it's obviously going to look Star Wars, and you can't just use that. But
yeah, that makes sense.
A model of the White House, and you're going to blow it up or something, or you're just going to make it look like the White House.
I mean,
you can do that.
Some people, if they were back in the day when they were doing a lot of Star Wars shorts and they were allowed to, there were a lot of miniature works with Star Wars ships.
They weren't allowed to get any money from this, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
That's terrible.
No, I mean they're using it was more like a passion.
They're never allowed to gain money because it's based off of someone's work.
So they did it for the love of the thing,
dumb.
and I mean, no, it's your property. Like, what if you created something, and then someone was like, "I like that. I'm gonna use it and make money off of it," even though you created it.
Same thing as in like us talking about how people steal ideas sometimes, and that would be
yeah.
If that was fair to do, everyone would just make everyone else's characters. So.
Yeah, it's like you created a character, you worked hard on him, and then people take that same character and use it for their own stuff, and you don't get anything for it.
All right, that makes sense. I thought you meant like if they made their own character, they had like some rule that they want to let them make money with their own creations.
Yeah, well, they can make a character, but if it's in a specific world that you created, like Star Wars or something like that, and you use Star Wars terms and you use Star Wars lore, then you're kind of using the Star Wars property, which isn't yours, which wasn't created by you. So I get it in that sense.
From that, so
that's
why they have those fan projects. If you're using a Batman fan project, you can't get money from it because you're using Batman. So people might watch it because it's Batman, but it's a fan project and it's made by you, so you can't just take.
But it's still cool because if you're a fan, you're doing it for the love of it, and also if you can do it with some skill, it can become a real. Like you might not be able to get paid for it, but you can show people, hey, I did this fanfic, and I've seen fanfics win awards and stuff.
Yeah, it's not my thing to do fanfic stuff. Some people like to do that, and I think that's cool.
I think I
Yeah.
would do it. It's just mainly to like get experience and to practice with the different effects. And stuff.
Yeah, I guess it's just not. I like to do original stuff. That's just what I like. So I prefer that. So if I was gonna practice, I would practice just some random, maybe like a bad version of something.
Yeah, to each their own. But I'm just explaining. That's kind of the point that I was going to make. On is like people do just explaining that they do use like stuff from those movies and stuff to create shorts and use those miniatures, but they don't get paid for them. But they still, gain experience and learn a lot and practice, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. So does anybody have any comments or questions? I think, do we answer V's? Oh, so the actors are usually like, they're not really used too much. I mean, they might be, but from what I've seen is they're not really used too much in the miniature sets. Like you might put them in from far away to make it look like, they're, because they have to be, scaled down to size for the miniature set. So you're not going to zoom in on them because right when you do that, the miniature set
Oh.
goes away, and obviously they're bigger than the miniature set.
Be so fun to do like a whole scene, like create a miniature set. If I ever had the motivation to do it, and then have little puppets, and you do like a whole movie, like no.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's been done. Like you can do
That's
stuff like that because it'd be like
that I would do.
claymation or something like that. Those are all done with these.
Like like some like scripted out. So you have a whole script, then you would make the whole miniature set, and then you would like act it all out and edit it.
Yeah, claymation is very much like that. Like you make the little set, you make the characters, and
Done
you
well.
go frame by frame, doing the actions, doing the stories.
Yeah,
there's
sounds like
there's always that sitcom episode of, well, not always, but I remember there was a sitcom episode of Charmed where they were basically inside of the dollhouse that was a miniature of the manor where they lived, and they basically made like a mini set of their bigger set, and they went back, like they only had to add her in, like when they would open the house, the toy house or whatever, they would add like a little mini Phoebe in there and it would look not the best, but yeah, they did do that.
Yeah, so it'd be something kind of like this. Like you'd have a person walking across a blue screen, and then you just kind of add it into the miniature set to make it look like they're far away and small, but you wouldn't be using it too much because it's mainly just used for establishing. If you stay on it too long, people start focusing on things, and then they start realizing, oh, this looks a little weird.
Another thing that they might do is like they will have the person in focus and then the image like way in the background. That I've seen done as well. Like on a green screen, they will add the image of the miniature, but they won't do it like too focused. Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
too much in focus, they'll start
matter
to
of like,
that aren't like really how it is. So
huh?
I said if it's too much in like they usually keep it a little bit out of focus if it's the background because the background's really not that much of detail, and it's just because they're gonna have it for a background. Oh, there you go, something like that. So they have these 3 little cars on a table that they made to look like the street, and then they just set it up like that. They got the camera right to make it look like those cars are on the street with that background.
Mm-hmm.
A forced perspective makes it look real, but once you start moving the cameras, it'll look a little weird. So they usually just do it for one shot or something like that.
That makes sense. So that's a forced perspective. That's cool. So it looks like the giant cars, but the miniature.
Yeah. So it looks regular. It looks fine when you look at it from the forced perspective view on top, but really they're just these little mini cars that are in front of that background. So
that's the exact type of shot that I need to tell Daniel about that I was thinking of.
Oh, cool.
For the when we film, because we were talking, because there's some vehicles and stuff we need for some of the shots in the background.
Yeah.
Like that would cost a lot of money to hire in like an ambulance. So it's interesting.
Cool. Yeah, you can do something like that and just add like little lights and stuff in there after.
Yeah, like
post production.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah.
Well, not easy, but not
easier than getting a real one. Maybe, yeah. So
yeah.
So yeah, that's the reason you do stuff like this, just to get make it cheaper and make it a little easier than getting these kind of actual cars. Especially if you're doing a period piece, sometimes it's easier just to get like some little fake set pieces and miniatures and then put it into your scene, so that you can have something like this to make it look like the city and just, you know, briefly show, so that when you go to whatever building you're actually in, people's minds are like, oh, they're in this city right here. They're probably in this building that says, you know, restaurant or whatever. And then they go in there and they have a restaurant, and now they're in this scene, instead of them just instead of trying to find a location that actually has all this stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. Like if you think about like once you understand like the basics of a lot of stuff, that you can start really putting together more and more things. Though it's more fun, like obviously with more crew and stuff, because I just find it to be the most fun is when you're creating projects and you're collaborating with other people.
Yeah, and it makes it easier
Well, it's faster. Everyone
when they
like
have
doesn't
more minds working on it.
but it's also just cool. There's so many cool
And
things.
like we said, mixing your special effects with your practical effects, making sure the lighting matches whatever image is on the green screen or whatever image is on your miniature, wind, that kind of thing. The videos I sent via WhatsApp explain it a little better.
So yeah, stuff like the snow, they'll like, you know, spray something to make it look like fog, or they'll, you know, blow something in to make it look like the fog in front so that it kind of blends in if they're doing an effect like this. Or they might like have some, you know, like I said, powdered sugar or, you know, whatever else you could use to look like snow falling down in front of it so that it also blends into the background and makes it look more real. So you don't have to do everything in post. Just like with anything, the more practical stuff you can do usually makes it look a little better than if you just try to do everything in post.
Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
All right. So after that, what we have is the location contact list. This is just real quick. It's easy. All it is for is just to make sure that you and whoever needs to have the location owner's contact information has it. If there's any damage or any property damage, you got to contact them, let them know. If you need a time extension, like if you agreed to do it from 2 to 6, but you're like, hey, can we stay till 7 or 8? You got to contact them and let them know. If you get locked out, there's missing keys or lost keys or anything like that, you got to contact these people, and you want to have something to quickly get to contact these people, so you don't have to figure out who owned this location and, you know, do I have their contact information and all of that. You want to make sure everybody has it just in case any of those things happen. So you want to keep something similar to this, where you say what the location is, what the actual location is, what the address and the contact for the person's email and their phone number, what their name is. And if they happen to be one of those owners that live on the other side of the states, but they own locations over here, you want to keep that in mind too, so you're not contacting them at different times. If it's going to be later or earlier for them, you got to know. And there's any comments you have, like if they will be busy after 4 p.m. or anything like that, you want to make sure to keep all that just so you have it and make sure you know when to contact these people if something does go wrong. Hopefully you don't even need this, but it's just a backup in case you do. So location contact list. And you want to make sure you don't give it to everyone, just the people who need it, because you don't want to be giving out anyone's information to people that aren't needing it in case they're going to be annoying.
Yeah, no, I guess that makes
Yeah, you
sense.
want to just give it to all these PAs, and if they're looking for the location, they keep calling this person, and the person's getting pissed.
Yeah, most people are fine, but it only takes like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because they're not supposed to be, you know, having to deal with all that. That's for the
If
first.
that's someone else's job, like if you need to call a specific person for the location and you instead keep calling the owner, that's going to be annoying. So it just makes it a little more confusing if those people don't need to have those extra contacts, you know?
Yeah, so you just give it to whoever needs to actually be on set. If they have to arrive earlier to the set, you know, maybe they're setting up lighting or they're setting up the cameras or whatever, then they'll probably need a list of this. But everyone else, the people that can come later or the people that are underneath somebody that has this list, they won't need it. So just give it out to the people you think actually need it. But yeah, that's it. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? Location contact list.
Remixes?
All right. So
Mhm.
last for today's stuff, and then we'll get into the stuff we skipped.
Woohoo! Okay.
Well, no, and then we'll get into the stuff we skipped.
Aw. No, I'm good. I'm joking.
But for today's stuff, it's just helping actors remember their lines. And some actors will use things like a hidden earpiece, like this picture right here. If you guys see the Black Spy hidden earpiece, they're so small that they can kind of just go into the ear and be not visible. Sometimes if the scene requires it, like maybe they're supposed to be undercover or they're in the Secret Service or whatever, and then you can actually have them wearing a physical one of these, which is actually being used. These are just used for sometimes when actors like they have like a big monologue or a big scene and they can't remember their lines and you've tried different things. This is a way to just secretly feed their lines during the scene.
From the articles we read, it's used a lot in theater when you have like big named actors in doing theater and they're not used to theater, or older actors that have reached a certain age and sometimes have more trouble memorizing their lines than they used to or than others. And there's actually an interesting article talking about it and other things that can be used, because in this one we wanted to focus more on like how can the crew help the actor memorize their lines, or remember their lines. But I also sent to Sarah, Brent, and Angel, the actors in the group, a few videos about memorization techniques and skills and stuff like that. That's also really interesting.
I have a comment on that, on memorizing lines. What usually helps is if you do your understand the character intention and what the story is, you'll have like a way easier time memorizing the lines if you do that first. If you try to memorize the lines before you kind of like analyze it, it's actually more work. If you analyze it first, because then you're like integrating the story as you analyze it. So it's almost like you're already working because you're reading it over and over.
But there's also some people that like if they overanalyze it, they won't memorize it at first because they'll be overthinking their lines and then they won't be able to tap in. So it's
just one,
yeah, definitely. Like it's very it very much varies from person to person. We just wanted to focus on the crew aspect and like what crews do and what sets do to help out the actors to remember or memorize their lines.
Yeah, so from the actor's perspective, it's just such a different beast than everything else. I just try to focus on from the crew's perspective and how they can help more than because acting is just completely different. It's so many different techniques and different things you got to learn.
So subjective. So yeah, but definitely, if you want to share any techniques like I sent to you guys, feel free. To have that conversation in the WhatsApp or in the book study as well. Since we're reading directing actors, we haven't messaged in the group yet, but we're on track. We'll be sending our notes soon.
Yeah, so if the actor is having trouble and they just can't remember it, maybe they have a long scene, a long monologue, or a long, maybe they're making a speech, and it's going to be like, a constant dialogue, and it's really hard, and they just can't get it down no matter what. You might want to try one of these tricks, which is like either giving them a mic and having someone like physically read them the lines as they're doing it, and then they can hear it and interpret it and act it out the way their character would.
That's hilarious.
Doing the scene, as long as their ears aren't shown, because certain things, like you might not have one that's this small, you might have a bigger one that's kind of sticking out. But
dude, I'm not gonna lie, that tiny one gives me anxiety. Like, what if it gets lost in there? Like, it's scary.
I have one bigger, like this guy right here with the 5 hidden Bluetooth thing. As long as that ear isn't in the frame, it doesn't matter. He can be turned the other way. But if he has to have that ear in, you're not going to be able to. If he has to have both ears in, you're not going to be able to put something that's visible in their ear. So you want to make sure to have something that is going to be hidden, that's not going to be picked up on, that's going to be like hard to tell.
What if you painted the outside like the inside of your ear?
You can, like,
there are some that are like skin colored or beige,
but it still doesn't completely match, and your ear would look like it's, you have a dark spot in your ear because that's where the hole is. So if all of a sudden
that person doesn't have a hole.
No, I mean like hand painted, so it looks like the inside of your ear. In like for an illusion.
then finding it would be an issue
it,
because you're
sure.
like, oh crap, where is it?
If you
And then
do
next thing
that,
you know, you're sticking it further up your ear, and then you gotta go to the doctor.
no, I mean, no, like that is a way you could do it if you are skilled in something like that. I personally,
I'd be terrified.
I wouldn't be able to make it look like somebody's ear, so I would have trouble with that. But these are just, if you can do that, yeah, definitely. However you can do it to make it hide, if they're having that much trouble and you need them to have something like this, then however you can get it in the scene without it being actually seen by the cameras, sure. If you can pass by their ear and you don't notice, then that's perfect. It's
The
great.
article is actually really interesting because it goes into like the morality or like the, I guess, pros and cons of using earpiece, if it's ethical, if it constitutes good or bad acting. It's really interesting for those of you that want to check it out.
Yeah. I thought the more interesting part was just how they're saying, does that take away from the acting, the performance? Because are they not going to give as much of a performance if they're not in the character, or are they going to give it better? Like it depends on the actor, most likely.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is
especially because it still does take some skill for you to listen to a line and immediately be able to interpret it well enough to where it still looks and feels like acting.
right.
So that's
This is
there's
more
still
of a
skill
last
there.
resort. Like hopefully your actor doesn't need this from the get-go. They just need it for certain scenes, if at all. Hopefully they don't need this at all. But just in case, there are things like this if they just can't get it. There's also actors who will often hide their lines like on a piece of paper or something somewhere in the room that's unseen by the cameras. Especially if they're like reading a book in the script, and in the scene they're reading a book, they might have their lines just taped to the pages to help them remember them if they're having trouble remembering. So I've seen that. There's also teleprompters. They're not used as much on film and stuff like that, but occasionally they will be. If the actor's having trouble, you might get a teleprompter and use that just to have their lines somewhere for them to see.
Or the method that I sent you guys, the actors.
One of those.
I'm talking about the Shakespearean method, which actually was used before Shakespeare, but where he would like use memorizing with the actors to basically associate a pillar or a door that was different colors in the theater to a specific line. And that was really interesting as well.
Right.
But yeah, that's from the
actor's technique.
I don't think of it just from an actor's technique, just because that's something that they that the director actually helped them, with. But yeah, that's why I sent it to the actors.
Films is that like the actors are going to be reading their lines. They're hopefully going to know them when they arrive on set. These are just things you have for backup in case they don't. So you shouldn't have to like work with them to, if they come to you with a problem and they're like, hey, I can't remember these lines. They might have the lines, they need to be changed, or maybe you need to find a way to work with them to do like some kind of technique that helps them to memorize them, like Priscilla was talking about, or you add visual aids to the lines. But
yeah, my only thing was just like,
for the most part, you won't even need this, and these are just like backups. But if they do have a lot of dialogue in a scene, you might want to get one of these types of things to have a backup just in case they don't remember.
Like if it's a huge monologue or something like that.
Yeah, because they should know their lines most of the time when they're doing film. And that's one of the good things about film, is if they don't know their lines, you can stop. And this is where the script supervisor would come in, where they always have a constant up-to-date script. If any changes are made, any new lines are added, or any new lines are changed, or if lines are removed, the script supervisor should have that reflected in their version of the script. So when the actor needs a line, script supervisor can give it to them and be like, this is your line. And then you can say cut, get their line, they memorize it, and then you do another take. So that's the good thing about film. It's not you don't need to know your lines as well as you would if you were doing something like theater. But most of the time, the actors, if they're professional, they should already know most of their lines and know the scenes because they've studied before they even.
But like we said, in the cases of if it's an actor that's not used to theater and he's doing theater, which was a lot of the
So,
examples that we
all right.
saw, or an actor that is older and is having some trouble, then those would be cases where that might be useful.
I feel like sometimes, actually memorizing all your lines and stuff like that, kind of like helps with the character, because then instead of you just trying to instead of
You
you
okay?
trying to yeah, I'll just get in the car. Instead of you trying to just do the lines just like that, it'll be better memorizing everything. So when you go into, shooting, you actually focusing on what the character or the character will be doing, opposed to trying to memorize all the lines. Because you could even, almost, I want to say like feel like the character wants to say the word shit, right?
Yeah.
Or a word like that, or you, instead of using shit, you can be like, asshole, but it's still coming across the same meaning. You're going,
Still get demonetized. No, I'm kidding.
huh?
No, I just said still get demonetized. Because you're still
Yeah. I use a donkey word. It's a donkey word. But
No, I'm just joking.
yeah. But it's just like certain language.
Yeah.
Like, even the video you sent, he was saying, at the end of the day, once you know what the character is going to say or have an idea, you don't have to memorize every line, because it's all about relaying what, the message is, making it real. So
yeah, like we said, this is mostly for the like if the crew needs to help the actor and he's really not getting it, or if it's like an extreme situation or a circumstance, we have these tools as well.
Right. I'm known for just improvising, man. I've always been doing that. Like, I know what the character is trying to say, but I can't remember the lines. So I would just, go off of the top of my head on what message the character is really trying to say.
But sometimes that specific line is very important. So there's also that to consider.
Well, no, but also sometimes the improvised line will work better. So
that's very true. That is very true.
As long as the director,
you're making it believable. Yeah, because you're making it more believable. Like, almost like I had somebody's script I was reading, and the line just sounds so like too fake for the character. It was like a well-spoken line, and the character is supposed to be a real asshole. So it's like, why is he being so proper? Like, and it didn't work. And I changed it around, and the director didn't, not the director, the theater director didn't like it. But then after hearing it, and I guess, after a couple of people came there and was like, yo, did he forget his line or something? We could use that. That actually sounds more believable the way he said it. Because as an actor, certain lines you just have a feeling like it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
And it's hard, because now you gotta figure out, like, you're not the script supervisor, script director or whatever. You gotta follow what they ask you to say. You gotta be professional. Sometimes, to me, that gets a little difficult when you're trying to get into character and really feel the character, and they have certain words that are being used, and you're like, I can't get into character using this word.
That's why it depends very much on finding, like, not every actor is going to work well with every director. I think that if there's anything we've learned, at least for me, I think I've learned that, is that everyone has different methods. Like, a method that will work for one director might not work for that actor, or vice versa. We have to learn the balance, though, like finding the balance between, okay, I have a different method, or, you know what, we're going to work as a team, collaborate, do a little bit of what you want, do a little bit of like a give and take, so we can do the best.
Give and take.
I think that's why I try to like hear what everyone thinks about it, like talking to them about the lines, because that's why it's good for rehearsals. When you're going through rehearsals, hearing those lines, and that's the time to speak up about it. It's less so on set. If they don't have a rehearsal, then you have to do it on set. But rehearsal is the time for experiment, discussion, and all of that, so you can figure it out before you get to set.
Right.
Yeah, that
'Cause
makes sense.
you have a saying, right? Like sometimes you might have a saying that helps you either get into the character or you feel it like you might be like, damn man, like on a scene, by you saying damn, it's kind of like you kind of bringing that character to life by saying that word, even though you're adding to the script, or somebody be like, yo, I guarantee it. And it's like, that's not part of the line. Guarantee is not part of it, but it is, I definitely will do it. But instead of you saying definitely, I guarantee I'll do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on that's why it's good to listen to the actors, and because they're going to know, most of the time they're going to know their characters really well because they've delved deep into them. And that's why it's
Right.
good to hear other people's opinions and not just dismiss everyone. But
we also have to understand that some lines, there
some
are
lines are
cases.
important to the rest of the scene. So
Yeah.
even if it doesn't work in that particular instance, occasionally it is for the script as a whole. And so then those
Right.
kinds of lines.
And that's why communication is important, because
Right.
sometimes like communicating with the director, like, hey, can you explain this line to me? Is it absolutely necessary? Can I change it around? Because there are some lines that, I know this doesn't make sense now, but it'll make sense later. Or this line is crucial for this scene or for the message or whatever. And having that communication and that give and take and looking at both perspectives, like the director looking at it from the perspective of the actor and the actor looking at it from the perspective of the director really helps, so that they're not just focused on their own mindset and their own perspectives as well.
So you said that sometimes like an actor and director will have a hard time working together. What do they do to remedy that? Like, what if that happens?
Well, that's what I was saying is just like, I feel like there has to be a give and take and there has to be a lot of communication, but people communicate differently.
It just depends on the two people in general.
Yeah.
However they handle it is going to be different. Depending.
That expression, if one doesn't want to, two don't fight. It's kind of like that.
Ultimately, if the director's not going to give any, you can't try to take, because it's the director's final call. So if you are working with a director that's just trying to like tell you exactly how they want it, do it that way, and just don't work with them next time if you can.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if you're there to do a job and you are getting paid, and you're like, okay, this isn't my passion project, but I'm going to do the best I can. It might not be the perfect ideal. That's going to be a choice that you're going to have to make at the end of the day, and be like, you know what, I'm never going to work with this guy again, but right now I'm going to give him what he wants. Or, you might choose not to do it. That's up to you. It depends on the lot. And
yeah, I would say to be professional, just do it.
Yeah, I would say
they're not
that too.
letting you change the line. If it's a line that's horrendous and you're like, oh, this isn't going to work, but they're not letting you change it.
Because it's gonna show. It's gonna show when the actor is giving his
Do
all.
it the best way you can. Because there were lines in movies I've heard, especially sci-fi, they go into like these weird lines that doesn't sound real because they're trying to explain some kind of very difficult scientific thing. And so then the actors have to say these really weird, chunky lines that sound bad, but the director's like, I need it to be said. And they just try to do it as best they can because that's just what the director wants.
Because you also have to remember that you can tell when you're watching a movie, you can tell when the actor is giving it their all and the lines just aren't helping. So if you're doing a project, don't completely disregard it because you don't get to say the exact line you want or you don't get to change everything you want in it. Because if you are doing your best, that's going to come across. Even if it isn't the best work, even if it isn't like exactly the way you wanted it, we can watch a movie. Like, I know all of us have probably been there where we can watch a movie and we're like, holy crap, the actor is giving his all. The script is not helping, but the actor, you can tell. So just keep that in mind as well. Because sometimes I think we're quick to be like, well, this isn't working, I'll leave. But they might see your work ethic and they might see, wow, this actor has passion. He was just given a crappy script, or maybe the director didn't know how to work with him. And that might get you another chance too.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the worst thing to do is to quit because then nobody's going to hire you if you quit in the middle of a project. So, yeah. Even if it's hard, that's why most actors will be like complaining after the fact. Once they're got their non-disclosure agreement, they can start the project and saying it was terrible working on that show. But
Yeah.
Yeah, like
They're
like
working
like
on the project.
Denzel
Like,
said.
when I'm done with
take
this.
it out because it's just the professional thing to do. So it doesn't matter
Right.
how unprofessional the other person is. You still need to maintain your professional.
And that will come across.
that makes
You will make a
Yeah,
difference.
because you hear some actors complain about how they had a bad experience, but it's like they did so well in the movie that you thinking they were really good friends after the movie because it was so hard, well, warm and all fuzzy. And then you hear the actor saying, "Oh, he was so hard to work with," and it's like, what?
And that speaks to their professionalism. It really does.
He asked, well, is it common for any industry to hire for the skill and have a level of comfort on the job on set? Is if the vibe is good and the skills line up, is that a big factor? Yes, that's why you'll see directors are working with the same people over and over again because they mesh well. They get each other. They
Right.
understand. They're easy to work with. They get the same actors over and over again. Like,
Or actors will
Quentin
want to work with the
Tarantino.
same directors.
yeah,
Right, look at
you'll see
Quentin
a lot of
Tarantino.
directors
He
that
always
get
get
the same actors over and over because it's just easy to be with someone you know is good and know they work with you, they get what you're talking about, they don't try to find something or whatever.
And it's just like any job. Sometimes you're going to have to, like, I don't want to say pay your dues, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you'll have to do a work that it's not saying don't compromise your morals, but there's a difference. Sometimes you'll do a crappier movie here, but you will give your all and you'll be like, you know what? That you're going to do so great that a director, an actor will see him that, you know what? He went through all that with that. Even if you do talk about it later, you went through all that and you were amazing in that movie. I want to hire you, you know? We can see when it's good directing. We can see when it's good acting. Well, maybe not always when it's good, but we can see when it's good acting, and we can see when it's a good script and bad acting.
You can see when it's good directing. The whole thing just goes.
No, yeah, definitely. But I'm saying that sometimes people who don't know the industry might blame something else instead of, I feel like directing,
well, people that don't know the industry might blame the actor too. So I mean,
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
sometimes
That's the next thing too.
it can be hard in that sense.
Yeah, they don't know.
Blaming the actor and then there's a crappy script.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like the script, if the actor is giving his all, the script, we can tell. But when sometimes
you see movies where it's like the script is so bad, like you could tell like the actor is bringing it home, and he's the only one carrying the movie, and everybody else is like, yo, because he's making that little bullcrap script sound believable. Everybody else is trying.
If he's not, he's sure darn trying.
Yeah, and I find that like sometimes you can even like love somebody to death, but sometimes you just need to complain about one little thing that is bothering you because you need to get it off your chest. And if you have the wrong informant, that could turn out to be a disaster, like your best friend, and then later you find out that like you were just what's it called? Doing your normal, like, say like I could love my mom, but she did something to piss me off, and I'm gonna complain to my best friend about it. The problem with the film industry is that you have to be so careful because somebody could just like be a dick and be like,
I feel like that's with any job. Like if your boss hears that you're crap talking about him, yes, the industry is more close knit and more closed to where, you got to be really careful if you're caught trash talking someone or whatever. But I just feel like at the end of the day, the default should be, let's be professional. Your friends are your friends. But if you're in a work environment, try to be as professional as possible. And
the problem comes. The reason why everyone gets so upset is because it's the same thing as if you wrote something, a script, and you sent it out, and everyone says, "Oh, it's great," and then you're gonna make the movie, and then you have somebody come on set that's saying, "Oh, this thing's generic," or "This line's generic," or whatever, and then everyone else is okay with it, but they're going around talking to people, trashing it, and it comes back to you. You're gonna be upset because that's something you worked on, and they're the ones thinking it, and they're kind of being rude and bringing down morale on set.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? My rule of thumb is just like never complain about anything. Like I even to like your friends that aren't even in film. Like, it's just not even.
That's what journaling is for. At the end of the day. But you need to find that balance, because if you have a gripe on set, and it's really bad and you need to communicate it. But trash talking later, it can come off as like, well, you could have come to me with it. And some people, we never know. People are different. You know, their emotions, their way of communicating is
Yeah, for
different. Their way
me,
of taking
sometimes
things.
like I could be what's it called in the moment upset with somebody who said something, but I realized later it ended up just touching something personal, and I don't actually have a problem with somebody, but you have to still deal with it.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen sometimes.
It's just
Not,
like, it's just like fights in
Don't
marriage.
show up.
The pastor always said that like half of the fights you'll have in your marriage are not worth it. It's the same thing with people. At
Just
the end of
let
the
it
day,
go.
maybe give a break, take a deep breath, try to understand why you are having an issue with this. Try to think about how you're going to put it if you really need to talk about it. If you're still feeling bothered about it the next day, talk to someone about it, you know, and
Yeah.
clear it up.
I agree. That's the best choice. My phone might die here, but yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. So does anybody else have any comments or questions about any of the stuff we were talking about, or remembering lines, or?
I gotta go. See you guys later.
Oh, have a good night, Sarah.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on then to marking actors. So marking actors is used. We've already kind of talked about this, but we're just going to go in a little more detail. Marking actors is used when you want the actor to stop in a very specific place, and you need them to be, you have the camera set up and a separate, like you have the focus and the camera set up for a specific shot, like this person's legs right here, his feet. So you might put like this little marker, and since they're showing his feet, you can't have the marker be right at his feet. So they actually have the marker be off frame over to the left, so he knows kind of where to stop, where to be. And this just gives him a area to move around in where he knows, okay, I'm going to stop in front of this green thing, but not go beyond this blue. And that way the frame is going to be lined up perfectly for this shot. Normally what you'll do when you're not showing people's feet and you can't see it in the frame, you'll put down paper or gaffer tape to make a T like this. And that'll show that the right foot goes here, left foot goes there, and that's where they stop. And it's because you have the camera set up somewhere where they're going to walk into the frame, or they're going to walk into focus, or you're going to rack focus back and forth between two characters. So you need to make sure they're in the right spots. Because you do all that rack focus and all the adjustments and all of that, you figure out a lot of that during rehearsal or pre-production. So you want to make sure that it's all ready to go and set up, and that you're going to nail it. And that's why you set these kind of markers to show them where to stop. Because if you don't, actors won't remember, oh, I'm going to stop right here on this part of the floor, and they might step a step or two in front of it. And that will make them not be in focus when you rack back and forth. So you can do like these T's. They also have different marks, like maybe a box. You can do just two little strips in front of their feet, like two little lines. Depends on what's the easiest and the best way for the project. Sometimes, like I said, when you're showing their feet, you might not be able to put these T's down, but you might be able to put something. Like if you look at this, you can see that little white, like the golf tee. Since it's in the grass, they don't want to have something that's visible, because they're probably going to show them from far away. If you're showing like a full shot, then you're going to have them from their toes up above their head. So you can't have something visible like this tape or these little metal things. So you want to put something just like the actor's going to be able to see it, but the camera's not. And something like a golf tee could be used for outside. You can use little, if the grass isn't going to be seen, you might want to get these little metal tees that are heavy so that they can be used outdoors. They have a lot of these types of things. Different stores can have it where you just put the tape over it, different colors. That's another thing. You want to make sure you have each actor having their own color, so that if you have 3 actors in a scene, actor 1 knows that their color is pink. They're going to stop on all the pink marks. Maybe they have to have 3 different marks in the same scene. And so you're going to set up 3 different T's, and they're going to know they stop at this one. And then for the next part, they walk over to the next one and they stop, and they're always going to the pink parts. And that's just to keep it all from being confusing. If you have all these same colors all around the place, you want to make sure everybody has their own so that they know where to go. Let's see. Always make sure the mark can't be seen in the camera. The second assistant camera is usually the one to do this. The first or second assistant camera will be the ones marking people. Most of the time it's the second assistant camera, but sometimes it'll be the first. And you just you go mark them and you put these tapes down wherever they are. They usually pay really close attention during rehearsals so they know where this guy goes, and that way they can put these little things down. So like this is from what we saw earlier. So the frame was like right around his feet and the mop. So right out of frame is this little green T, the little blue mark, and that's so that he knows that he has to stop here. Don't move the mop past this part. All those things, because the camera's right there to the right, if you can look and see. So that's just setting it up perfectly in frame to make sure they don't go out of frame or out of focus.
That's kind of cool, man. I like that.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, the different tricks people use to get these things done.
We definitely gonna need that.
So you remember where to go.
Exactly.
They also have things like sandbag tees. Let's see if I can find one. Something like that in the middle, that purple one, it's a little sandbag so that if you are outdoors or it's windy or something, you can still use these. And it's like it won't be blown away because it's heavier.
Right.
That way, if you can't use tape, if you're on the grass, like we saw earlier, but you can still use one of these tea bags, you can use like one of these or something like this so that the actors know where to stop. Let me see. It can also be used not just for the actors, it can also be used for the camera itself, the camera operator. And maybe if they're panning or something, they know where to stop so that that green mark or the orange mark or whatever doesn't get into frame. They make sure to stop before that. So sometimes it's used for the camera as well. Like the one we actually looked at, just the guy, that was also used for the camera. So that they know where to be. Because if you look at this in the camera, and then you look at this one, you can see that right off of frame would be these two marks. And that way the camera knows not to go down anymore. The camera knows not to go to the left anymore because you don't want to get these things in the actual frame. So sometimes they're used not just for the actors, but for the camera as well. Okay, and then there's also the times when even if you have the marks down, somebody might consistently miss their mark. That's what's missing their mark is. It means they've stepped over it, they didn't go up to the mark, whatever it is, it's missing your mark. And then if that happens and you're the one having to set their marks up and keeping focus, and you're the assistant camera 1 or 2, you either the first or second, I mean, you can ask them to kind of play the scene naturally and take a mental note of where they are and where they go so that you can figure out, okay, they feel like they're going to stop here. I'm going to mark them here. And then hopefully you get a little bit better at the focus because it's all about focus and framing. So if the actor feels like they're going to stop 2 steps behind where they're supposed to, then maybe just move their mark over and hopefully that they stop there the next time. If they don't, what they've said to do is a trick they use is just kind of like mapping out the area a little bit. So if the actor is moving all around, they're not sticking to these marks, they might just say like, okay, well, if I focus to this part, it'll be right here in focus. If I focus here, it'll be this part in focus. And then they kind of just guess as they go if the actor just really doesn't hit the marks, which I've heard happens occasionally with different actors. Sometimes they'll just, they just never go to their marks, no matter how many times.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens when you get so much in character, you get those involved in your character that you just, and you making it work. It's like you ain't worried about no markers. You're just worried about staying in character.
Yeah. And that's a problem for the camera, but it's good for the actor and the scene somewhat. It's good for the scene if you can capture it, but it's really hard for the assistant cameras and the camera operator.
That's true.
Because then they have to figure out where to look where to focus and all of that
Mhm.
other stuff when you have like a
Right.
remade.
It's also hard for the entire set really because it takes longer to film and you're there for trying to capture it on the camera,
Yeah.
which means longer hours as well. So having that balance again, very important. It's like it's great you're in character, but try to remain within this space in your mind.
Another
Have
thing to
it
say
in
is
your
that
mind.
certain actors might be looking down at their marks all the time, so it might be better just to have the mark there for rehearsals and stuff, and then take it away.
Yeah.
Generally, where to end, because you don't want them to be looking down at it. The whole point is so they know where to stop, but not so they actually like physically look and
Yeah.
get it in camera.
Because you seen that in some movies, right? With certain actors, it looked like they looking at something, and it's like, what are you looking at? That's not part of the scene.
They're looking at
But
their
you catch them
markers,
maybe.
or they're looking at
Yeah,
their
they might be
lines.
looking at them. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I've seen some movies, but I'm like, what are they looking at?
Yeah.
Because when they look at the camera, didn't show over there.
Right. Yeah, so you don't want them looking at the actual markers. You don't want them looking at their actual lines, but if they're there, it's just to help them get a general sense of where to stop and all that. And then, of course, if that scene is going to be, if the floor where they're going to stop is going to be in the frame, and you're going to see their whole body, let's say, then you would just have it for rehearsal, blocking rehearsal, and that kind of stuff, and then so they get a general sense of where to stop. And then you would take all the markers away so that the camera doesn't see anything. So if the floor is in the scene, you just do it for rehearsal and you do it before you actually start filming, and then you take them away so that the camera doesn't see anything. All right. Does anybody have any questions or comments about marking? All right. So next thing, blocking actors. We've already talked about blocking a lot. I'm just going to go over some general things about blocking actors specifically, and some things we've probably already gone over, but just some few things I wrote down a few weeks ago when we were going over this. Actors with tasks and things to do will show emotion through those tasks. You can also help blocking by knowing where they're going to be going in the scene. So if somebody, they don't have anything to do and they're just talking, it's sometimes better for them to just have like go through this stack of papers. You're trying to find a specific paper in here, and you can't find it while you're doing the scene. And then they just kind of go through the papers looking, and it kind of gives them something to do. Where they're going to be looking. They're going to be looking through the drawers, or they're going to be looking through the stack of papers in front of them. And that way, if they do consistently miss their mark, that's another thing you can do is give them something specific that won't have them going around the whole room. And that way you know where they're going to go. Maybe you say, you're going to look in that drawer over here for your ring, and then you're going to go over to the desk and look for it. That way you know they're going to stop at the dresser, they're going to stop at the desk, and you can kind of capture the scene that way. So there is a way to kind of go around doing that. And it also makes the actor feel like they're actually doing something, so it gets them out of their head because they're physically doing something while delivering their lines, so they're not just thinking about how to deliver the lines.
Yeah, I agree. I hate watching movies where they're at the dinner table and no one's goddamn eating. Everybody's just talking. I'm like, no one's eating?
Yeah, because it's just set pieces and stuff. So giving them something to actually eat or physically put in their mouth, even if they're going to spit it out, it will help with those lines, and it'll make it seem more like a dinner table scene.
Yeah, man. I want it to look more authentic. You actually eating. You see some movies, they're like, damn, he'll be eating peanut butter and feeding the dog peanut butter. Imagine you just holding the peanut butter in your hand and just talking. I'm like, what are you doing? You going to take a bite or not?
Yeah. And it also depends on how many takes you got, because you don't want to keep giving them, because if you're doing, especially like peanut butter, it would start getting harder to do the lines the further you go. So
yeah.
Got to keep that stuff in mind too if you're ever going to do something. Ice cream, especially. Ice cream's the hardest thing.
Oh yeah, I've seen actors like they can't even say their line, but it plays off pretty good. Or you see a scene where a guy's eating up, tasting a pot of food that's actually on a live stove and actually burns his mouth with the food, and it kind of brings the scene, kind of gives it an authentic.
But what he's talking
like,
about with the ice cream, What I'm talking about with the ice cream is because it melts really quickly. So if you're shooting with someone eating ice cream,
Oh,
one scene it can be like full on cone, and the other scene it's like super tiny, and it's like supposed to be the same scene. So like try to have food. That's why they sometimes don't mess with the food or don't eat. It's because they want to make sure that the scene is exactly the same in case they need to reshoot it, in case they need to be there for multiple minutes shooting that same scene, you know, and the scene looks the same in case.
It's also about planning.
Rather.
Sometimes they don't have extra because they didn't really think about it, especially if it's a smaller independent budget and all that. Sometimes they don't have the sometimes they don't have the extra props for the actors to use, so they didn't make 40 pancakes, so they can only do so many takes with those pancakes.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing. So sometimes it's like that as well. But yeah, so the way it usually works on a professional set is they do the blocking, where they show they do the scene and they kind of see like where the actor's going to go, and then they block it out, or they block it out before they even do that. If it's a technical scene or a visual effects scene, they have to block it out really far in advance. So then the actors will just kind of have to follow along with wherever they're supposed to be, because it's complicated and they can't just do whatever they want. So the more difficult, the more things you add into the scene, the more technical it starts to get. And that's when it starts to get a little hard for the actors. Like when we were looking at the behind the scenes of Game of Thrones and she's on this dragon and everything, she can't just do whatever she wants. She has to look like she's looking ahead. She's flying this dragon. She's in control, even though she's on this giant green, ride pretty much in front of a green screen. She has to pretend like she's in the air and she has to act like there's stuff going on. So the more technical you get, the more elements you start to add, the less freedom the actor can have. So it's also important to keep that in mind. But the way they do it is they usually block it out, show you where you're going to be in the room. Then they set up the lighting. They might have stand-ins for the lighting, which we'll get into in a second. And then they get the rehearsal. They rehearse it, see if the lighting works. The camera's going to work with that lighting and where they're moving, and nothing else is going to be in frame. Is the sound person going to be able to be over there? That kind of stuff. And then they tweak it, which is like, oh, the sound person, you got to step back 2 steps. You're going to have to extend your arm because otherwise the pole's going to be in the shot, whatever. Or that light's too far away. Let's move it closer. Stuff like that. They tweak it all, and then they shoot. And then they do the actual take. And then for the next scene, if they move anything around, if they do a reverse, they're shooting it from the other side, reverse. Anything like that, they're going to redo all this stuff. They're going to block it out again, lighting, rehearse, tweak, shoot. And anytime you move anything or you set up a new scene, they do that in that order. That keeps everything consistent, and it keeps everything from going wrong and all that type of thing. So blocking, lighting, rehearsing, tweaking, and shooting. Next, you may want to do a private rehearsal to work with the actors to block the scene or just to get it down. So sometimes a director might have a private rehearsal with them, or they might have just the camera and them in there so that they can figure out what that scene's going to look like. And then the lighting crew and the grip and all those other crews come in and they work around that. So they might sometimes have just the camera and just the director in there to figure out how to block it, and then bring in the rest of the people to figure out, all right, this is how it's set up. Figure out how you're going to do your work. Since the acting is usually the most important thing, the more natural it feels, the more natural it looks, the better most of the time. And so that's why they might do something like that. Another comment somebody made is figure out why your character's moving. Make sure there's a motivated reason for the movement. They're not just moving around to make the scene look cool. If there's no reason for them to get closer to the other actor, they don't need to. There's no reason for them to, go over to that dresser or whatever, then they don't need to. So make sure there's always a motivated
That's a very good point.
doing things.
Yeah, that's
Maybe they're
very true.
nervous, maybe
Good
they're
point.
excited, or maybe they're just busy with tasks. So that's why they're moving around. But if they're just moving
Right.
around so that it's not still, you don't always need that. So most of the time you don't. If the dialogue's
Right.
good, people are going to be captivated with it, whether they're standing still or moving around. So always think about why the character's moving when you're blocking. And lastly, you can use a blocking chart during pre-production to get a general foundation of what the blocking the scene may be, especially in more difficult scenes. Blocking chart. No, that's not what I'm looking for. Something kind of like this, where it's kind of showing a general, like this is where this character is going to come in and they're going to go over here and do this. The more difficult you have, the more likely you're going to want something like this, just to have a general sense of where character 1 and character 2 are going to go. And, this is showing that red character starts here, position 1, position 2, position 3, and then that way. And then character 2 goes from 1 to 2, and then they turn that way. So that's a lot of showing like where these cameras are going to be and where the character's going to go, and figuring out how the movement's going to be within the scene before you even get to set. And that's a good way to
And
do
that's
it.
very,
Very difficult.
yeah, I feel like even what you're saying, like the private the private rehearsal with the actors and the director, just to see, because sometimes you might ask the actor to be in this position or do this and say that dialogue, and he might feel like it's gonna come off better me going over here and grabbing this, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and that
Because he might be going
depends
off his
also
shot list.
and location. It's like stuff like this is very pre-production. It's like, hopefully the person's not too set in stone on it, because the location's going to determine how much space there is, or if you're even able to put the camera over here or over there, because there might be something blocking that way. And the actors might, like you said, the actors might feel like, I don't know if I'd move on this line. I feel like it's not that important, blah, 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 blah. And so then these are mainly used, I would mainly use this for just something more difficult, something with visual effects, something that's very specific to how they need to move, less than just trying to figure out,
Right.
because I feel
Yeah,
like,
that's a very good point.
yeah, like maybe if you did that private rehearsal, you can kind of make up a drawing of this to be like, that's kind of what it's going to be like if you feel like doing it that way. But I would mainly use this just for difficult scenes that
A big,
require
right.
a certain area.
More action scenes or something like that.
Yeah. Instead of like this dinner table scene where there's 2 people, which is pretty easy to get.
Right.
Like it's pretty easy blocking, because they shouldn't be getting up and moving around most likely. So why are you even making a blocking sheet?
Right.
V said, if doing dinner scenes as an actor, could it make the lines maybe not sound as clear? Is it common as a director to do a take while everyone's eating in a wider shot, then another take for close-ups, leaving room for taking sips or holding a fork? From what I've seen, yeah. It depends. I mean, like I've seen, like Brent said, I've seen some stuff where they don't do anything with the food because it's supposed to be a quick scene, but it ends up like kind of dragging on longer than they thought, I feel like. But I've also seen scenes where they're constantly eating and they're talking. Hey, Brent's kid.
But
So I think it
yes,
just depends.
Honey, it's a girl.
I said Brent's kid.
I got 2
but you
girls
make
and
it
one
sound like a
boy.
Kid
I
sounds
got
like
2 girls and 1 boy.
Child, Brent's kid.
But I believe you got some shows too, even like Godfather, when they were sitting at the table, they were all
Yeah,
eating. They
girl.
wasn't pretending, like imagine shooting an Italian dinner. Like I can't see them just not eating,
Greek, Brazilian. I can't imagine any of those cultures not eating.
No, so yeah, they do have it, and sometimes it just depends on the director. Sometimes they might actually want that muffled sound so it sounds more real, like you're eating.
Yeah, it might be, for example, like we want this family vibe. Like in The Godfather,
Right.
it was supposed to be like
family,
it was supposed to be a family having dinner and
yeah, you hear
and
plates
so
knocking, cups,
yeah,
and
and
they
they
saying their
wanted to
lines, and it's like,
give that feel.
But if
Yeah,
they
like
went
a
to
Or-
Thanksgiving dinner.
kitchen and stuff,
Yeah,
they
but
might
there could
do
also be a
just the
scene
screen
where they're having
plate,
breakfast or dinner
or like somebody
and the
cutting,
focus.
or if they want to make
Yeah,
it awkward, they might just do like nobody's kind of eating. They're all just kind of touching their plate with their fork.
yeah.
It really just depends on the scene.
If they want it to be rushed, for example, if they want the tone of it to be rushed or awkward, they can do it like where they're just talking and then running and then leaving before they eat, or they barely touch their food. It depends a lot on what you're trying to get across, on the dialogue, on the emotion of the scene. I've seen like
Yeah.
dinner scenes in movies where they like have a couple bites, look at each other, and then the more tense it gets, the more you see them just playing with their fork, you know, and stuff like that. So I feel like it depends a lot on the
Yeah, that could work
on the
too.
tone.
Yeah, it depends on the tone. You're right. You gotta be set, like it's true. Sometimes I feel like some of the actors get nervous. So instead of eating, they want to make sure they're on time with their lines they're trying to memorize. So they
Yeah.
might forget to
Especially
take
if
a
you have
bite.
to eat that thing multiple times. For example, like if you're shooting a scene where they have
Oh,
to
yeah, the
be
food's
eating.
gonna be cold. Like it's not gonna be hot.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
example, like Amelia Clark again with the Game of Thrones, because I don't know why it's just the first thing that's in my head today.
You're in love with
She
her.
was talking about the scene it's no spoilers, people, because come on, where she was eating she had to eat a horse heart or whatever. And it was a scene of her basically having to eat a horse heart raw, but really it was like this gummy thing full of like jelly and like all this stuff, candy. And she said by the end of it, she wanted to puke because it was like really sweet. And she had to like take multiple scenes of her eating the whole thing. And she got really nauseous towards the end. So it's just, you also have to think about that. Like if there's a scene where they're eating, it might be cold. You might have to shoot that multiple times. And then they're like, oh God, my stomach. So they try
I
to
actually
keep
have
it
a story
safe.
related to that.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I got hit up last second at like 12 a.m. on Tuesday by an old friend that I had worked with asking if I could emergency replace his camera operator on a passion project of his.
Nice, cool.
So I said yeah, because I had nothing else to do
That's
that day,
dope.
even though they weren't paying me. It wasn't matter. It was mad cool. It was a great experience.
Yeah.
Right.
There was a take where there were shots where one of the characters is eating a burrito and he's walking towards camera. So we're like getting multiple shots where he's eating a burrito.
Yeah.
And they only bought one burrito, so we had to make it last all that time. And by the time we were done like shooting the shots where the guy's eating the burrito, like by the last few takes he was just like, this is cold, this is disgusting, the guacamole is hard, I want to throw up.
So they try to keep it safe with food,
So if you're ever doing food, the thing I would take away from that is always bring an extra just in case.
Or
Or
make your
maybe
own.
just have fake food, or maybe just have a little bit, or maybe
if you
just
want the realism in there, you gotta have real
Nah,
food.
yeah, you gotta go real all the way or go home.
No, I mean like if you're not showing like close up on the food or whatever.
Well, something like that, I would
Right,
just,
if it's
Not
like
to
a
be
close-up, you can
wasteful.
replace like beef with like tofu so that it's not like, going bad
Exactly.
in the middle of the shot. But, like,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Like you
you
see
also
the
don't wanna
scenes
be
where they're
wasteful.
eating a burrito, and I'm like, yo, he looks like he's enjoying it. And I'm like, I know they probably did that scene mad times with that burrito. But like you said, get some Chipotle with some,
Really, by the end, you
tofu.
want to puke, and you're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
That's how good of an actor I am. I'm making it look like this is delicious when really I've been eating this for the past 6 hours and I just want to throw up.
That's what Lakota said about you all the time when he's eating your food. He's always in character.
Mm-hmm. Brent, you better not play about my food. Just don't even start.
But yeah, all right. So, does anybody have any questions or comments about blocking?
No, it's pretty cool.
Oh, another thing I want to say is these diagrams like this, it would also be a good way to see the 180-degree rule, making sure you're not passing it without a reason.
Oh, did you talk about the blocking rehearsals?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah, the
Sorry,
blocking.
I was making dinner for a bit, so I don't know if I missed it.
But yeah, so
Nah,
like
he
this
covered it.
crosses the 180-degree rule when the camera's to the left, and that's the kind of stuff why you would use these, is to make sure you're getting everything right, that it's going to make sense. You're like, this character's walking over here, and then they walk over to the left, which gives me the leeway to bring the camera that way, and then now I can be on this other side of the shot. And that's the way they would do it, to show like which camera's which and when and all of that type of stuff. So if you have a difficult shot with a lot of camera movement, a lot of character movement, you probably want to do one of these just to kind of get a general sense of how it's going to go down, and then get on set with the actors to figure out how they're actually feeling like moving, and then adjust it from there. Last thing we got.
You said that like 2 minutes ago.
No, this is the last thing we got. Stand-in. So stand-ins can either be on a lower budget production. They're going to be just somebody like your crew member, or whoever is willing to do it. Maybe your actor in general is going to be their stand-in, so it's not really going to be a stand-in, but you'll get like a crew member usually, or you might have somebody that is willing to do it just to go stand where the actors are going to be. So you can set up the camera and the lighting and all of that while the actor is either getting ready or off doing something else, like taking a break or whatever they're doing. Most likely they're going to be getting ready for the scene, but sometimes they might be eating, or they might be, having a conversation with their producer or whatever. So you have these stand-ins so that you can set up the lighting and get it adjusted correctly to what the actor is like. On a larger budget production, usually you can hire these actual actors that do stand-in, that they look alike and they're going to act like the actor. What they do is during rehearsals, they watch the actor's performance and they memorize what the actor does, where they were when they did what they did, how they did the lines, how big up, like how much they opened their mouths, how high they raised their right hand when they said this line. All these things they actually watch for all this stuff, so that they can truly mimic the way the actor did it, so that the lighting crew and the camera crew can get it just right. So when the actor comes back, they have their blocking set up. And usually, like the actors, like I said, they'll be doing what's called last looks, which is where they go hair, makeup, and wardrobe before the actual take. Stand-ins take the place and they copy the actor's movements for lighting and focus. They're usually around the same build, complexion, and hair color as the principal cast. If somebody has black hair and tan skin, they're gonna have different lighting than somebody who has very light skin and blonde hair, or someone very dark skin with black hair. It's all gonna be different lighting to make sure those people stand out the best way they can. So you always set up the lighting based on all those factors, and that's why when you get a stand-in, you want them to look as
similar height as well to also help with the camera.
Yep, similar height and build, muscular, all that type of stuff, so that you can see if it's a very wide person, they have a very wide frame. You want a wide stand-in so that they are going to be in the same spot and taking up the same amount of screen as the actual actor. And as you can see, they use they don't have to look exactly the same, but it's just like similar hair complexion, same clothing. Definitely, they always have them in the same clothes, and just similar face almost. Not exact, but it's just for lighting and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be exact.
Yeah, it's more about height, build, and color for lighting and stuff like that.
Most stand-ins are union. Most stand-in jobs are union. So if you were to try to be a stand-in for a production, you'd actually need to most likely be joining a union to do it. Stand-ins have to be professional and ready to go. They can't just be.
Why does it look like Gimli's stand-in is winking at the camera, or super drunk?
Certain times they'll have a stand-in like this scene in the actual scene. So maybe they couldn't find the actor. Maybe the actor went home and they went, oh crap, we need this last scene. Whatever the case, I don't know what it actually was, but they got the stand-in to be there. And you don't really notice unless you pause and pay attention most of the time. You shouldn't be able to notice unless you look for it, is what usually is what the case is. So if you're just watching the movie, most of the time you probably won't notice that that's not Gimli, the actual actor. But if you pause it and look at him, if it stands out to you and you're like, wait a second, you go back and look at it, you might see like, oh, that's not even him. So it just depends. But most of the time they'll do that if they feel like they can get away with it and they don't want to have to pause production or go back for a pickup or any of that type of stuff. They'll just have the stand-ins be right there. But usually they'll try, that's the last resort. They don't want to put the stand-in the actual scene unless they have to.
Yeah, they were talking about the fact that it was like stand-ins, most are union work, but for you to become union, you need the credits. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in a way. And they kind of explained different ways of going about it in the article that I thought were interesting.
But yeah, stand-ins is a very you have to be ready to go right when they need you. They shouldn't have to be called by the assistant director for the next setup. They should already be ready. So they have to be always paying attention, especially during rehearsals. They have to really pay attention to the actors and where they move and all that other stuff so they can do it exactly like it. Paying attention to all the little details because they might get asked questions like, how high did they raise their hand? And they need to know. So if they don't know that, that's going to be bad. That's going to look bad. And that's why stand-ins will have to pay like extra close attention to every detail that actor's doing. And
yeah, from what we saw, stand-ins, it is work as well. Because I know some people, myself included, I didn't really know how much actually went into stand-in work.
Yeah, but for a small, let me keep going down my list and then I'll go back to it. Utility stand-ins are typically used for light and camera rehearsals. They may stand in for multiple actors on the set. So sometimes if it's a lower budget, they'll have the same stand-in actor do multiple people. If it's not like especially important to get it exactly right, like maybe it's not a close-up, it doesn't matter as much. And so then they just have.
Maybe the people are all similar heights.
Well, no, like the utility stand-in.
Because it's camera and lighting.
Right.
You need to be able to have the height for the camera to know.
Not for a utility stand-in.
No?
Utility stand-ins stand in for multiple actors on the set. They're just there to be like, go over in the general vicinity of where they are. So it's usually a lower budget thing that still has enough money to hire a stand-in actor, but it's not as intuitive and it's not as crazy as the stand-in.
I must be mixing it up then. Sorry.
Exactly like the actor. Utility stand-in is just used so that they can put them over there. Okay, and you're going to be this actor now, so go over there, and then they watch the rehearsal and they try to mimic movements, but they're not going to be able to see every actor's performance, so they do it a little less. And it's mainly just to kind of see how the lighting looks on a person rather than how it's going to look on the exact actor. And then they might tweak it a little bit once the actor actually gets to set. Single camera stand-ins, they must match the height, build, hair, color, and complexion of a principal actor. Multiple camera stand-ins are hired for experience and professionalism. They're used to establish camera shots, movements, blocking, dialogue, and don't necessarily need to look like the actor. So that's where the utility would come in. They're mostly just to go around where the actor would go around so they can start setting up lighting and camera before the other actors come back in. And if it is very important for them to get it right for their height and build, they might give them a box to stand on or something like that, or they might just wait for the real actor to come back. But for general scenes where they're just doing it for blocking and stuff like that, they're not going to need it to be as specific and as exact, which is why we use something like that. Depending on the production and budget, stand-ins may be required to help set up the scene with props or set dressing, help move lights and position stuff, or even read through the principal actor's dialogue if they are unavailable at that moment. So they might work with the other actor and be like a fill-in for the lines if the other principal actor is not there. So if you have like Tom Cruise and Liam Neeson in a scene together, you might have Liam Neeson in his dressing room doing whatever, and you have Liam Neeson stand-in reading Liam Neeson's line to Tom Cruise so you can get the Tom Cruise side of the scene while you wait, stuff like that. So stand-ins actually do quite a lot, but on a lower budget, like for us, we would probably just have somebody in the crew or one of the other actors do it if the other actor that we're blocking for or setting up for is needing to be in makeup or something like that. But yeah, does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
Nope.
All right.
No,
Well, that was everything.
that bien.
That was all for today.
All right. You go through what the next thing, and then I'll ask before we say goodnight. I'll ask Arden since she's here, and something, and then we can say goodnight.
I was just gonna say, so everyone, just a reminder again: shot list and the green screen exercise. Both of those are gonna be next Monday, on the 19th. So this coming Monday, I guess. So just if you have it ready, we'll go over it during the meeting. There's nothing else we're going over. We're just going to be talking a little bit about like some of the films we've already watched, going back into cinematography if we have time. Other than that, we're going to be looking at everybody's green screen practice exercise and the shot list exercise and just kind of discuss those things. And that's all we have going on Monday. So just try to get those done if you can. If not, hopefully you can still take part in the conversation or just watch it and kind of learn from there.
Yeah. All good?
Sounds great.
Bye, recording done.